Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios. It's Football at 4.
Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast, and it is brought to you by Caesars Entertainment Group of Atlantic City. Come experience the ultimate sports destinations all season long at the Wild Wild West, Tropicana, and Harrah's Resort, Atlantic City. Book your game day experience today at Caesars.com. Andrew DiCecco's here on a Friday edition of Football at 4. He's powered by the Inside the Birds podcast, and InsideTheBirds.com is where you can read Andrew's coverage of the Eagles and the Cowboys. And he joins me right now here on the Sports Bash Happy Hour Friday edition. Andrew, what's going on, man?
Mike, how you doing, my friend?
Always good, man. I love the Friday opportunity to get a chance to break it down with you as you do it so well. And let's talk a little bit about some of the things that are happening with this Eagles team. Happening today, Andrew, the news coming out is Jordan Myelotta knee injury. Looks like he is in doubt to play on Monday night. And let's get right there. What kind of blow would that be if both Myelotta and we know Brandon Brooks is already out? It has shades of 2020 written all over it.
Well, obviously, you never want to lose your left tackle, but if there were an opportunity or an opportune game to do so, you would like it to be against a team like a decimated defensive line like the Dallas Cowboys. They're also decimated on the defensive line. So, I mean, they just activated Randy Gregory from the COVID list yesterday. Bradley Anae, one of their other pass rushers, was just placed on the COVID list today. They have Terrell Basham, who's been a 27-year-old journeyman. This is his third team. He was a third-round pick of the New York Jets. Didn't really do much there. And Doris Armstrong, he's going to be out this week as well. So, I mean, there's going to be a lot of inexperience on their line. So, I mean, if you're without Jordan Myelotta, is it something that you would like? Obviously not, and hopefully it's not long term. But Andre Dillard should be able to acquit himself relatively well against something of a mash unit for the Dallas Cowboys on that front.
Yeah, I know a lot of people are not very high on Andre Dillard, but this is an opportunity for Dillard, Andrew, that if he doesn't want to be here or doesn't want to be a backup, I mean, he's not Ben Simmons saying he doesn't want to be here, but if he doesn't want to be a backup, this is his opportunity to show teams around the league that he can help them out, because there's a lot of teams in this league that could use left tackle help.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's how he needs to approach this situation. First and foremost, you need to represent yourself well for your teammates with the Philadelphia Eagles, but you also need to look at it as an audition opportunity, because obviously he's not going to figure in their long-term plans as the left tackle. Obviously, they've committed to Jordan Myelotta, and he's going to be their mainstay at left tackle. But this is another opportunity, Mike. You talked about the preseason being an opportunity for some of these guys. Well, now is a good audition for Andre Dillard to prove that he can play at this level, play competently at this level, and dominate the players that he should be dominating against, and hopefully carry that over and parlay that into a starting job elsewhere.
All right. Obviously, not having Myelotta is going to be a big factor if he, in fact, cannot play. There was a tweet from Mike Garafolo earlier that suggested that he would not be ready to play in the game, but he has an MCL, which means it's not a long-term thing. But you said on Tuesday you thought Nate Herbig should be the guy. It looks like that could be a longer-term thing, and they're going to go with Landon Dickerson in that spot there. But you know, the big thing when they got Dickerson was that they wanted this guy to provide depth all across the offensive line, right? So how about him fitting in at right guard as opposed to one of the other positions? He was really drafted, I guess, to be a center or maybe even a left guard, but right guard is kind of like the long shot spot that we thought we'd see him. So you still think Herbig would be the better option there, or are you feeling more comfortable with Dickerson now that he's getting the full week?
Well, I always thought that they were going to go with Landon Dickerson. I just thought that it made the most sense logically to go with a Nate Herbig, given the continuity and that he's done it before, and you don't want to necessarily throw Landon Dickerson in there and have him forged by fire, especially 9 months off the ACL. But, I mean, in his 33 snaps, Mike, he flashed some of that athleticism that warranted that second-round selection, but he also, like I said, as to be expected, struggled from a power and leverage standpoint. But, I mean, playing right guard, out of all the positions on the offensive line, right guard is the one that you can sort of hide the player a little bit, and I think that they'll be able to do so. Also, his matchup this week projects pretty favorably. He's going against a third-round pick from UCLA named Osa Digizua, who is 6'2", 280 pounds. really struggles at the point of attack, can get washed down against the run. He's very quick off the ball, but Landon Dickerson outweighs him, and he's stronger than he is and should be able to have his way in that matchup. And I think that he's going to be able to sort of lay on him and wear him down throughout the game. Obviously, Odigizua is not somebody that the Cowboys would ideally like to start. I think he'd be a good number 3 defensive tackle in a rotation. He does play with great effort and has a great motor, but I don't know that he's going to be able to play the full gamut of snaps. He's already played 58% of Dallas' snaps this season, so we'll see how that goes. But as far as Landon Dickerson goes, I think that's a good first matchup.
Yeah, and I want you to kind of expand on Nick Sirianni was asked the other day about the fact that his offensive line really outweighs the Dallas defensive line by like 50 pounds a guy here. So, Andrew, would you, if you had a chance to sit down with Nick Sirianni, would you suggest that running the ball this week is the way to go?
Absolutely, especially in the early goings where you're trying to feel each other out and you want to get Jalen Hurts settled into the game. You want to get the team settled in and start to control that clock and just start to move bodies, because what starts out in the first quarter, you start running the ball and you gradually start to keep that pace throughout the game. It starts to wear on these undersized defensive linemen. Now all of a sudden, in the second half, you're able to open up the playbook and really win, because like Chip Kelly used to always say, big people beat up little people. I believe that was his saying, and that's going to ring true. And I think that if they stick with the running game early on, even if you only get 3 yards, 4 yards a pop, stay with it, because ultimately at the end of the game, these guys are going to wear down, and then you're going to have the advantage.
Yeah, so obviously the Eagles, how would you describe their run game so far this year? Kind of nondescript.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's a lot more of a balanced approach this year, which you like to see. But like you said, it has been pretty nondescript. I do like that they just continuously go out. They're using Miles Sanders a little bit more than the previous regime did, because Miles has shown the burst and the ability to be, to move ahead and give positive yards. I like what they have in Kenny Gainwell as a good 1-2 tandem there. And I think that he's going to be heavily involved in the game plan this week as a pass-catching running back change-up option, and then, of course, in the red zone as he has been. So I think that they have a really good 1-2 tandem there, and I think they're going to continue to utilize that. And eventually, Mike, one of these weeks, the running game is really going to pop for a couple of big games. So they just need to stay with it and be consistent.
All right, talking with Angel at 4 here. I want to talk a little bit about the lack of usage of the tight end so far. And, obviously, you got Goddard, you've got Ertz. Those are two guys that are kind of old faithful feels. If you're designing the game plan here, are you going with your dependable tight ends to try to, put points on the board, or are you kind of following the game plan of the first 2 weeks of utilizing the wide receivers?
Well, I mean, I thought that last week was certainly wide receiver heavy. I think that you need to get Jalen Hurts comfortable and get some throws over the middle to have him sort of tap into that aspect of his game. There's going to be opportunities there, Mike. The Dallas linebackers are not very proficient in coverage. Dallas Goedert has a big opportunity to stretch them vertically, and I think if Zach Ertz is there as well, you can really attack the seams there and in the middle of the field and exploit that while also utilizing the weapons that you have. And I think Devontae Smith is going to have a big game as well, compile a lot of targets, and much like the stat line that he had in week 1. But yeah, there's going to be a lot of opportunity here to attack this the linebacker area as a whole, and I think they need to do so. And it's going to be a big game for Jalen Hurts to sort of establish that part of his game, because in the summer at training camp, Dallas Goedert and him had a seamless connection, and you want to see him tap back into that, because he's proven that he can do it. Now it's just got to correlate and translate onto the playing field, because he's shown that he can do it.
There's so much around this game and matchup-wise that are kind of intriguing here, and you flip things over to the Eagle defense, and you're losing Brandon Graham, and obviously he's a big heart and soul kind of guy of this team. And the pass rush, how is this pass rush match up against the Dallas offensive line? Because I think we kind of think of this Dallas offensive line as one of the better ones in the league. They had their own injury problems, and they've also had the suspension here. So what kind of Dallas offensive line are we seeing Monday night?
I think it's a beatable line for sure, and I think particularly on the interior. This again, we've seen talk about this every week, but Fletcher Cox and Javon Hargrave are going to have a chance to establish the line of scrimmage early. I think they're going to be able to collapse the pocket. They're going to have an opportunity with Connor Williams and Zach Martin and Myelotta, the center, to really get some penetration there. And I think a player who I'm going to be paying a lot of attention to is Derek Barnett, who I believe is going to be aligned over right tackle Terrence Steele. So I think that there's going to be an opportunity there. I want to see how Barnett responds to an elevated sense of responsibility, not just taking on an elevated role, but also he had that egregious penalty last week, and I want to see how he responds to that, because now, like it or not, he really is going to assume that he's really fronting this group because he plays the most snaps. He's going to continue to play the most snaps out of these guys. He's in a contract year, and he was a former first-round pick. So now you have an opportunity here to really put your stamp on this position. Everyone talks about Josh Sweat, and rightfully so. He's got the 3-year extension, and the team is committed to him, obviously. But if you're Derek Barnett, like we talked about Andre Dillard, this is an audition opportunity for you to really establish yourself and make the most of this opportunity.
All right. I think another thing, too, is we've not seen the big play, right? The Jonathan Gannon defense has not given up the big play, Andrew. What are some of the reasons behind that? And I would imagine they're going to be tested this week. Gallup's out, though, and we don't know the status on Cooper.
Yeah, exactly. I think Cooper is, as I understand, is going to be good to go this week. But I think that Jonathan Gannon's done a good job of protecting his corners, unlike the Jim Schwartz did. And they've also helped, again, it's only been 2 games, but they also helped from a positive game script in week 1 where they're able to sort of tee off on Matt Ryan. And they were one-dimensional, so it makes it very predictable as far as what they're going to do. This is going to be a one of those games, Mike, where I think it's going to be an offensive sort of a shootout. And much like last week I mentioned on your show that I thought it was more like a boxing match, and it sort of unfolded that way. But I think this week is going to be an offensive shootout. And I think one of the matchups to watch that I think can ultimately determine the outcome of this game is cornerback Steve Nelson on CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb has garnered 24 targets this season, 185 yards and a touchdown. And I think that he's going to have a favorable matchup going against the aggressive Steve Nelson, who has really stood out as a tackler on the perimeter, very physical, nosy player, but he's not extremely fluid and he doesn't have the long speed. So I think if Dak Prescott sees that matchup on the outside, he's going to strike fast.
That's a good breakdown by Andrew here, as obviously talk a little bit about Dak Prescott and what you've seen from him. Any ill effects from the injury or the arm problems that he has had in the 2 games that we've seen him? Because last week, they only scored 20 points. He was efficient but didn't have a huge yardage game, which is one of the first non-huge yardage games we've seen from him in my God, almost since he didn't play half the year last year. It seems like almost 2 years.
Yeah, and to answer your question, I mean, you have to love what you see from Dak Prescott. I mean, he went toe-to-toe with Tom Brady in the season opener. Looked like you didn't really see any ill effects of the injury. He's just a very consistent quarterback. Obviously, last week was somewhat of an outlier. Every quarterback sort of has one of those clunkers every now and then, but he seems to always give his team, his offense at least, a fighting chance in these games. And because he's such a rhythmic, consistent passer who facilitates the ball to his array of pass targets, and he picks and chooses his spots in which he's going to run. I just think he's a very smart, accurate, rhythmic passer, and the offense runs through him. So, I mean, yeah. I think you have to like what you see from him if you're a Dallas fan, and if you're an Eagles fan, you have to figure out how to stop it.
Yeah, and the whole dynamic of what Dak Prescott has added to their offense is returning. You see what he means. I mean, they were terrible at quarterback last year. As soon as he went out, their offense was a disaster. How much he means. How do you think they'll end up using Pollard now? Do you anticipate him being incorporated more?
I do. I mean, when you look at the tandem that him and Ezekiel Elliott combined, they combined for 198 yards on the ground last week. A lot of people are quick to write Ezekiel Elliott off. I wouldn't be necessarily so quick to do that. Yes, this season he sort of looked like his yards looked more like a plodding running back, and Pollard looks more like the explosive, springy, complimentary running back. Zeke Elliott has a lot of mileage on him, and I think the Cowboys, the way that he was utilized earlier in his career, the offense really ran through him versus it's going through Dak Prescott. And I think you're starting to see those effects. But now that they're giving more of a responsibility to Tony Pollard, who is a fantastic pass-catching running back and adds a little bit of juice into the backfield. And I think that the Cowboys are going to find ways to get him the ball in space. I think he's going to be a consistent presence in their offense, and it's going to be more of a balanced approach, and they're going to have to be able to handle the downhill running of Zeke Elliott and the perimeter running of Tony Pollard. So we'll see how that shakes out.
Yeah, really good breakdown. Andrew DiCecco, Football at 4 as the Eagles and the Cowboys. In your mind, it's week 3, but how important of a game is this in the NFC East, especially considering the Eagles' schedule coming up, Andrew, which, if you haven't noticed, is pretty difficult. Kansas City at Carolina, Tampa Bay at Vegas. Really, they don't catch a really break until October 31st when they're at Detroit. So if they don't get this one, I mean, it could be a long road ahead.
That's a fair assessment, Mike, but you never want to make a week 3 game out to be a must-win, right? Even in this, especially in this division, when you have a Taylor Heineke-led Washington football team, the Giants are a mess and sort of spiraling out of control, and Dallas they're just decimated on defense, and they don't have their deep threat, Michael Gallup. Like every team, you can make a case for them sort of sputtering at certain points this season. I think it's going to be a closely contested division all the way through. These teams that you're going to meet on Monday night, the Eagles and the Cowboys, I think that they're pretty evenly matched right now. And like I said, it's hard to sort of label a week 3 game as a must win. So I don't make too much out of it. Doesn't necessarily feel like Dallas week this week, does it?
I think the whole Ben Simmons thing kind of got in the way, right? Maybe the Phillies,
just a little bit,
right? Maybe the Phillies being in the kind of getting back. You're right, though. Like Ben Simmons, this whole Ben Simmons thing kind of just came out of not nowhere. I mean, we knew he didn't want to be here, but him digging his feet in the sand and then Doc Rivers talking. I mean, that took up 2 days of conversation. And then the day that Ben Simmons kind of went away, Bryce Harper throws a guy out at the plate. They get a 3-run homer last night. So you're right. It doesn't feel like it's Dallas week. I don't know why that is. Because both teams are 1-1, and it's a big game on Monday night. If the Eagles can win, they go to 2-1. They have possible first place in the division. So I look at this game as pretty important. It sounds like you're downplaying a little bit, but man, I mean, the injuries are starting to pile up already, and that's what has me concerned.
Yeah, and I guess the one thing I would say is the injuries are piling up for Dallas as well, and I don't consider the Washington football team or the Giants viable contenders for this division, given how the first couple of weeks have shaken out, and obviously Ryan Fitzpatrick out for the foreseeable future. So I think that threw a wrench into everything. So I wouldn't press the panic button just yet and sort of strap in, because it's a long season and a lot of things can unfold in a myriad of ways. So we're going to have to see how it goes. But I like the direction of the Eagles offense. I should say I'm optimistic about the future of the Eagles offense. And I think that they have the right recipe in Jonathan Gannon to keep them in it throughout the rest of the season.
All right. Your thoughts on the game Monday night? How's this thing going to shake out on Monday?
Well, it's very tough, Mike, to sort of their resolve is going to be tested. They're coming off a deflating home loss. They're traveling to AT&T Stadium for a primetime tilt with a divisional rival. I do expect the Eagles to respond favorably from the adversity last week. I mean, not to mention that they lost 2 prominent leaders in Brandon Graham and Brandon Brooks. I think that they're going to return to something of week 1 form, but I do think that an experienced Cowboys offensive unit is going to make a play or two late in the contest to sort of propel them to a narrow victory. However, I have the Cowboys winning 27-24.
27-24, Dallas from Andrew DiCecco. Check out the Inside the Birds podcast and InsideTheBirds.com for Andrew's coverage of the game this week. Of course, it is on Monday night, and it is right here on 97.3 ESPN. All right, Andrew, enjoy the weekend, pal.
Thanks, Mike. You too.